Well, good day there, everyone, and Chad here coming to you from my office on Valentine's Day week. Okay, well, at least Valentine's Day weekend. So for those of you who haven't done it, who didn't get to do anything on Wednesday, I trust you have a great weekend doing something for Valentine's Day. This is our Chronological Bible Reading Challenge for the year 2018. We are into week number 3, which essentially closes off the book of Job officially on our reading sheet here. We're meant to be reading Job chapter 40 to 42 and then getting back into Genesis with chapters 12 through to 29. But before I have a quick look at that, let me just say a big thank you to all those who've been encouraging me over the last couple of weeks. I had someone at church come up to me on Sunday who's been walking with Jesus for about 60 years, longer than I've been alive. Her and her husband have been in church leadership for many years, pastoring churches, etc. And she said, the book of Job has always confused me. I've never really understood it. There's been things in there I found very difficult. And this week, just hearing you say that it could be a parabolic story that's not meant to be taken literally has just really opened my eyes to reading that story again. So that's great, encouraging. I've also heard from a number of people, not only around different parts of South Australia, but also interstate and even overseas has contacted me personally to say that they are joining in with us on this Bible reading challenge. And so a big g'day to those of you who are part of our Beyond Bayside community. As I said on the introductory video, these are very low budget kind of videos. They really have an in-house vibe to them. And I trust you appreciate that, that this is just you and me having a chat over a coffee table to prepare you for your readings for the week. I'll be posting these, or endeavoring to post these every Saturday morning of the weekend, as we're just doing just now. But of course, to make sure you never miss out on a video, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. So just push the big red button there that says subscribe and your notifications should come up. You can set your notifications to alert you every time a video comes up. So by all means, do that to make sure you never miss a video. Okay, so we're finishing the book of Job. If you haven't done that already, the last few chapters, essentially Job and God get dialoguing one with another, and the whole story wraps up beautifully in the epilogue, okay? And we have basically what would be a happily ever after ending for the story of Job. So I trust that you gain some wisdom and some extra insight into that book if you haven't already. But I want to spend my time this morning talking to you about our readings in Genesis. We're going to be starting from chapter 12, reading through to chapter 29. And this is a great week, by the way. If you have some friends that aren't doing this challenge or haven't started with us, here in Genesis 12 is a great place to start. All right, it's a great place to kick off. So if you've got some friends who you really think will benefit from these tutorials or benefit from this reading plan, then please, by all means, share this video on social media. Invite your friends to be involved. Week 3, Genesis 12, is a great place to kick off. You have to go to our Facebook page or look at the link in the introductory tutorial here, the introductory YouTube video, and grab yourself a plan if you haven't done that already. But essentially, kicking off in Genesis 12 with what I like to call the age of the patriarchs. Okay, so Genesis 1 to 11, the age of the ancients, now kicking in to the age of the patriarchs, the age of the founding fathers of Israel. Remember, the book of Genesis is a book of origins. It is a book of beginnings, and the focus of Genesis is about the origins of the Hebrew people. It's all about the origins or the genesis of God's covenant people, essentially Israel. Where did Israel come from? Who are these people? That's why the Torah was established. It's to convince God's people as they're going into Canaan, into the promised land under the leadership of Moses, really Joshua, as they go into the promised land, that these people have an identity, all right? They're not a bunch of nobodies. They're not just a bunch of slaves, random people out of Egypt that are following some peculiar voice, all right? No. These people have an identity that is rooted in a long genealogy. And so that's why the opening chapters of Genesis really focus on the genealogies. You've got Adam and Eve, and after Cain kills Abel, the genealogy focuses on the next son, who is Seth. Cain's line, you don't hear that much about, all right? We kind of forget about them. And the focus is on the line of Seth. Then Noah kind of has a fresh start. He's got 3 sons. And although you hear a little bit about the first 2 sons, the focus of the genealogy is on the 3rd son, who is Shem. So these genealogies, the focus of these genealogies is to build us from Adam to Abraham, and then ultimately, the readings we're starting now, from Abraham to Egypt, from Abraham to Moses. Where the heck do these slaves get their lineage from? Well, this is easy. This is the story of the patriarchs. This is why this is recorded. It's to give God's people a confidence boost that they know where they come from. They know who their daddy is, all right? They know who their forefathers are. And secondly, that they know that the promised land that Moses is saying, I want you to go into, they know that that land has been promised to them way back. All right? It's not just something that Moses pulled out of his thumb. You know, when Moses was in the promised land, he thought, oh, this is a great idea. I'll gather me an army together and take it over. No. This group of people have a legacy right back to Abraham. And it is that father who was promised this land. So we have a legal right to it. And not only that, but the people who are in that promised land currently, the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, etc., we have a record of their genealogy. They came from the other sons of Noah. All right? But we are the ones who God promised this land to. And so that's why this book of origins has been written to really give God's people a confidence boost as they move in to the promised land. So again, that is where our head needs to be at. Incidentally, Shem, okay, from Noah's son Shem, that comes into Abraham and Isaac and Jacob ultimately, that is where we get the word Semite. Okay, so some of you have heard people refer to Jewish people as Semites. You know, if someone is anti-Jewish, they are anti-Semitic. That word comes from Shem. Okay, so that's the origins of that. So Shem's line, Adam through Noah to Shem, okay, and Shem to Abraham, and that's where we're reading today. We're picking up from Genesis 12 in the stories of the founding fathers of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What we're going to read this week is all about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their wives, and their sons. And you're basically going to read right up to when Jacob gets married, essentially. And that's where we're going to stop this week. A few things I want you to notice. The first is that we have some repeated motifs, okay, some repeated themes that all of these three men, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, see happen to them. Number one, their wives, their favorite wife, are all barren. They struggle to fall pregnant. But when they do fall pregnant, it is a sign that the son that woman gives birth to is a promised son, a special son. The other thing that happens with those special sons is that they are persecuted, all three of them. Okay, we've got Abraham gave birth to, Ishmael and Isaac, and then we've got Jacob and Esau, and then we've got Joseph and the boys. Okay. Each of these younger brothers were persecuted from the older brother, which takes us right back to the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain, the older brother, kills his brother Abel. This is a motif that is all the way through Genesis and ultimately carries us through to the first century. When Jesus comes along and he tells the parable of the prodigal son, where guess what? The older brother persecutes the younger brother, that Jesus relates that story, the older brother being the first century religious Jews, the younger brother being the Gentiles, okay, the sinners that are coming into the covenant world, that are coming into God's kingdom, and the older is persecuting the younger. Paul talks about this in Galatians, the old covenant and the new covenant community. So it's just amazing that God has set up the story right from the word go to have these motifs carry all the way through. That is why Genesis is not just a history book. All right? It is a prophetic book. It is filled with prophetic imagery and prophetic pictures that carry us through, literally all the way through to the book of Revelation. So I want you to keep an eye out for that. The second thing you really need to know when you read Genesis, or the second thing that we're really going to pay attention to this week, is the notion of covenant and the Abrahamic covenant. Now, those who know me well know that years ago I wrote a book called He Qualifies You. All right, looks like this. I'm going to shamelessly give this a plug, all right? Because this week on Valentine's Day 2010 marks the 8th anniversary where I published this book. And this week it's also available in electronic format. You can go to my website, i5812.org, and check that out. It's now in 6 or 7 different languages. It's gone all over the world. And now finally we've got it on Amazon Kindle, on iTunes. And in the next few weeks, hopefully, I'll be working on an audio book of He Qualifies You as well. So stay tuned for that. I'll let you know when that happens. But the idea of He Qualifies You was to look at the 3 major covenants of the scripture Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. The first one is Abraham. And the most remarkable thing that you are going to be reading this week is that God promises Abraham and his sons a special blessing. Some people believe that Abraham had two covenants. One was a relational blessing and one was a promise of the promised land. Okay, so whether there's two separate covenants or one composite covenant, you can come to that conclusion yourself. But the point is this: in the Abrahamic era, in the age of the patriarchs, okay, God blessed his people on the basis of a covenant of pedigree. Because Abraham was a man of faith, and God made a blood oath to him to bless him and to bless his descendants. It didn't matter how those descendants behaved. It didn't matter what kind of wild morality or poor attitudes that they had. God committed to blessing Abraham and his descendants because they were part of Abraham's birth line. They were part of his birthright. And so as you read the stories of Genesis this week, you're going to see some very questionable morality in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right, they're a bunch of thieves. They're a bunch of liars. They will half truth tellers at the very least, right? And their sexual conduct is highly questionable. Yet what you're going to see in these stories is that God never judges them, never punishes them, never rebukes them, because his covenant with them in this era has nothing to do with their behavior. God blesses them regardless of their behavior. He blesses them on the basis of their birthright. Because they are circumcised sons of Abraham, they qualify for God's blessings. If that doesn't make much sense to you, you really need to get my book. All right, check it out, i5812.org. Get the book, or check out my personal YouTube channel. You can see me preaching on that. Anyway, enjoy Genesis this week. Again, your readings from chapter 12 through to chapter 29. And then next week, we're going to kick into essentially the story of Joseph and cap off the book of Genesis and head into Exodus. Guys, bless you. I'm so thrilled you're doing this. And again, feel free to invite people to get on board. A great week to start with us here in Genesis chapter 12. So we'll see you next weekend. Okay, bye.